Can we just cheers to the fact that this video is on time this month? Hey guys, it's Hannah, and today I am doing my June wrap-up and July TBR on time for once. I read 8 books in the month of June, so let's just jump right into them. The first book I read in the month of June was Eragon by Christopher Paolini. This book is one that I'm really bad at trying to figure out a synopsis for. Basically, this kid finds this dragon egg, and the dragon hatches, and stuff happens. I mentioned this briefly in my last video, which was like a mid-year freak-out tag. But a friend of mine that I went on the New York trip with recommended this to me, and so when I got back and I was on that lake trip that I took right after that, I was reading this and then I didn't finish it in that. It took me quite a bit to read it because like it's kind of long. It's a really slow fantasy because it's one of those that goes in like detail with everything. It's a long journey. There's action, but it's not action at every turn. I haven't read a fantasy like that with that kind of pacing in a while. I think since The Hobbit. Like The Hobbit's the last one that I can think of that I've read that's paced like that. And I forgot how much I enjoy that kind of fantasy, so this was just a pleasant surprise. I plan on continuing on. Only problem is there's 3 more books and they're huge. This is the smallest one, so don't know when I'll get to them, but eventually I'll continue. I will say though, it is the kind of book where I'm not emotionally attached to all of the characters personally, if that makes sense. Like I care what happens and I like the characters, but I haven't created a deep bond with any of them yet, which is a little disappointing, but it didn't take away from my enjoyment of the story. The next book I read was Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn. This book is about a girl who's asexual and she's in this relationship, but her girlfriend breaks up with her because she's not making love to her the way she wants. This girl works at a library, which, you know, I thoroughly enjoyed reading about, and she ends up becoming friends with one of her co-workers, and you know. And I ended up giving this book like a 4-star rating, but enjoyment level it was more of a 3. I thought the ace rep was really good, so I bumped it up to a 4. Basically, I thought the ace rep was done really well, but the writing style of this book just annoyed me so much, and there would be times where I would get very confused because of the writing style and have to go back and reread because I'm confused as to who's talking or what's going on, and the writing style was a real setback for me. It kept me out of the story, and I feel like I could have actually given it a 4 stars because of enjoyment if there had been a different writing style. But I thought the characters were pretty great. I thought the relationship that happened was pretty great. So overall, it was a pretty great book and I'd recommend you read it. Just know that the writing style might annoy you to no end. But overall, I'd say it was a good story and I highly recommend you pick it up. The next book I read, if you saw my video that I posted last week, it is one of my favorites of the year so far. That is The Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. This book is set in the same world that her Remnant Chronicles series is set in, so you know, The Kiss of Deception and those books. Which, if you don't know what those are about, there's a princess, she's betrothed to marry someone, she doesn't want to marry him, so she runs away, and 2 people after her. One is the prince that's supposed to marry her, one is the assassin who's supposed to kill her. You don't know who's who. It is an all-around great time. This book is set in the same world. One of the plot points I cannot tell you because it would be kind of a spoiler for the Remnant Chronicles, but basically there are these soldiers and one of them is a master thief, and they go into this other kingdom because they're trying to look for this criminal, and I can't tell you what the criminal did because you'd have to read the Remnant Chronicles, but they kind of get in the court, I guess you'd call it, of this other kingdom and meet those people, and it's just an all-around great time. So my last video when I mentioned this, I did say I think you can read this without reading the Remnant Chronicles, but on further reflection, I really recommend reading the Remnant Chronicles first, just because you'd still be able to enjoy this, but there is quite a bit that you'd either be confused by or probably not care as much as you would if you had read the Remnant Chronicles. Plus, it's just an all-around great series, so I'd recommend you go ahead and read that series before you read this one, but theoretically you can just jump into this one. But I love this book. I loved the characters. I loved the way the plot was paced, what happened. The only thing with it is I wish Kazi, our main character, our thief, had done more thieving, because like the few times she did, it was such a rush and I loved it, and so I wish we had been able to see more of it. With the way the story is, I understand why that didn't happen, but I still wanted to see more of that, and so I'm hoping there's more of that in the next books. Also, the ending to this book, the cliffhanger is going to kill you. It is one of the most excruciating cliffhangers I have ever read. And if you remember when I read Obsidio, I said it was the first book in a long time where I had outward reactions to it. Well, this one also had very verbal reactions to it. So much to the point that my cat Waylon came and laid down with me as I was finishing it because I guess he was concerned. Don't really blame him. But if you haven't read any Mary E. Pearson book, if you read the first one and then were reading the second one and you thought it slowed down, continue on. The first book is my favorite. The middle one drags a little, but I think it's still amazing. And then the last one is also amazing. And then this series, this first book in the series would make it totally worth it if you still didn't like the last two books. Love that series. Love this series. This is the first book. It comes out in August. Please go buy it. Please read it. Please love it because I need someone to gush about it with, and there's nobody. I'm alone. The next book I read was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Sonnen Maguire. Is it Sonnen? Because I kept saying Sinan and everyone else says like Sonnen. So I think I've had her name wrong every video I've said it in. This is actually the second book in the Wayward Children series, which if you have seen some of my later videos, you realize that I read this out of order. I read Beneath the Sugar Sky before this one, thinking it was the second one when it wasn't the second one. But that didn't hurt my enjoyment, and I actually liked the third one the best so far of the series. Basically, if you don't know, which you probably do because I've been talking about it a lot, but this book is about a school for wayward children, which means it's a school for kids who have gone into these Alice in Wonderland-esque worlds and then have come back and have been basically unable to cope with the real world and just want to get back to where they were. And I will say, I think the third and second book have kind of sealed my enjoyment of the series, and I want to go back and read the first one because I think I'll just love it and appreciate it so much more at this point. The first one is at the school and you just kind of learn about the school. There's a mystery to solve. The second one follows two characters that you meet in the first book and them finding their world and being in their world. And the third one, you're back in the school, but there's more world discovery and there's another kind of mystery to solve. And that one's my favorite so far, but I've liked them all. I can't pinpoint what it is exactly that has made me like this series so much more now, but I do, and I highly recommend it. It's great. If you like Alice in Wonderland, you will probably like this series, so just do yourself a favor and pick it up. The next book I read was First and Then by Emma Mills. This is one my sister actually recommended I read because I got her into reading Emma Mills, but then she quickly surpassed me on the number of her novels that she's read. And she kept saying, oh, you're gonna like this, Hannah, you're gonna love it. There's like Jane Austen stuff in it, and it's great. And it was great, but here's the fun fact about it. I was reading this, and I was enjoying it, but like it wasn't anything spectacular. It's a real slow burn, and I haven't read a YA slow burn romance. I can't even remember the last time that a YA romance was a slow burn. So I was a little confused by it, because like nothing major had happened, and there was this one guy that she was friends with, and I was like, well, is that gonna be the love interest? And then there's the other guy that she hated, but like she kind of had a thing for. I was like, well, is that gonna be the love interest? And as I was like telling my sister this and like going through what I'm saying now, I went, wait, this is Pride and Prejudice, cause it is. And I didn't realize that, and I was a good, you know, like that far in the book, and I'm like, what is going on? This is so slow. Here's the thing, once I realized that this was like a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, it's like, oh, this is great now. So if you're in the mood for a very subtle retelling of Pride and Prejudice, I highly recommend this book because it was enjoyable. It's not my favorite Emma Mills book. My favorite Emma Mills book is Foolish Hearts. If you haven't read Foolish Hearts, you need to read Foolish Hearts. But this one was still really good. Basically any Emma Mills book. She's one of my go-to contemporary authors. Her and Jen Bennett, like A+ every time. The next book I read was Furyborne by Claire Legrand. This is the first book in the Imperium trilogy, and it's about these two queens. One is the Blood Queen, one is the Sun Queen, and they fit that prophecy because they are able to control all 7 elements. I liked this book, but I didn't love it as much as I was expecting to love it. The characters just really got on my nerves. I don't really know what it is about them, but I just couldn't get into them and understand some of their stuff, and that kind of put a damper on the series for me. And it took me a while to get into the pacing because it jumps between these two characters each chapter. So like you'd be in one chapter, then you'd jump over to the next and be a completely different story, and it was kind of annoying at first. Also, the very first chapter, it explains which one's which and who's who, although low-key, I kind of don't believe that. It kind of seems too easy, but you know, I'm gonna let it slide. I think part of my problem is when I first started reading this, I was reading it in like little bits, and so I would be in the story for a little bit and then I have to get out because I have to go work or do something. But at one point I was able to sit down and just read, and that's when I started enjoying the story more. Like I was reading this at work because I sit at a desk and I can read when there's nothing else to do, but I'd still read it in little bursts, and that just wasn't the way to do it. Sit down, read it through. But yeah, so I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. Might have been because of the circumstances around me reading it. I do plan on continuing on, but it's not one that I'm gonna be ranting and raving for the next one. It was not as good as Through Dark Clouds. Little disappointed, not gonna lie. The next book I read was Gunslinger Girl by Lindsay Ellie. This is a YA Western, which I have been looking for a good YA Western for a while. Vengeance Road I attempted to read a long while back and I DNF'd it. I can't exactly tell you why, I didn't like it. I think my problem with it was, and with this one, is they're trying to make female characters the leads of Westerns, which I am completely here for. But then they make these female characters really unrelatable and just unlikable when you go back and you read male Westerns with male leads and male characters, like Louis L'Amour, for example, because I love his books. Their male characters are enjoyable and relatable and likable, so I think that might be my problem. It's just I never like the main characters, and I did like the main character for this one. Basically, this is also kind of a dystopian retelling in a Western. It's set after the Civil War, but there's like a different way the world is set up, and she's on this like compound thing, and her father is gonna sell her off to like breed, basically. And so instead she runs away with her friend, and then people end up dead, and she ends up in this like really weird town. She ends up in the theater. She's a sharpshooter. Like, it's great, and I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. It didn't have that real Western feel I was looking for. And my problem with trying to find a good YA Western or a good female lead Western is I'm not quite sure what I'm looking for. I just know I haven't found it. So this book was good. It was fine. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. It was okay. So if you have any recommendations for a YA Western or a female-led Western that you think the female lead character is actually likable and not just made into this really hard person that has no substance to her, please let me know, because I would love it. The last book I read in the month of June was Me Ultima by Rodolfo Anaya. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. This book is about a Chicano family in New Mexico, and an elderly cuaderno comes to live with his family, and her name is Ultima, and basically it's about this kid Antonio's life when she's living with them. And it was so good. If you saw my Great American Reads video, this ended up on my TBR because I saw it on there and it sounded interesting, and it was so good. I guess you'd call it magical realism, but the elements of this story were so interesting. Like, there was this owl that made appearances all the time. It would have elements of a Catholic belief system, it would have elements of a Native American belief system, and it was just so intriguing and just so good and really well written. One cool thing about it that I didn't realize was gonna happen until I was reading it is like there will be sentences and random words in Spanish, and it'll say everything in English, but then it'll just throw in sala, which is living room, and keep on in English, or it'll have a sentence in Spanish because this family actually speaks Spanish, but you read it in English, but every now and then the author will just throw in a Spanish word or throw in a Spanish sentence. And I did take Spanish in high school, so I know a little bit, so I wasn't too bad at remembering words, but there were some words that I'd, pull out Google Translate and I'd be like, okay, wait, what exactly does this mean? But I thought that added to the story. I was worried that it would kind of take away, because there were some times where I had to like pull myself out of the story and Google what it said because I couldn't remember what those words meant, but it really added to it. It really added a whole nother layer to the story, and I loved it. Great story, highly recommend, very enjoyable. I mean, it was fantastic. I was so impressed. I was expecting to like it, but I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, so highly recommend. So those are all the books I read in June, and now on to the July TBR. I already read one book in July, and oof, let me tell you, it was a doozy. I'm currently reading If on a Winter's Night, A Traveler by Italo Calvino. I'm only about 30 pages in, but I am loving this so far. It is so interesting the way he's writing this, because it's like he's telling you as the reader what you're thinking and how you're reading this book, and you're basically following this reader read a book and the interruptions this reader has while reading a book, and it's just really good so far. So I'm highly enjoying this at the moment. Hopefully I can finish it soon, because I also have from the library Birds Art Life Death by Kyo McClear. I have like a week, I think, to read this, but I was already in the middle of this, so I didn't want to go ahead and start this, so I gotta finish this fairly quickly so I can read this before it's due and not have a late book. I also, at the same time that these two both came on reserve for me, I got Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell on reserve on my Kindle for the ebook site, and I was having a big turmoil on which one to read because I had just started Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. I don't remember if that's the way the title goes, by Douglas Adams. I was only like 3 chapters in, but then I got Fangirl on the Kindle. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I should read that. And then the same day I got a reserve for Italo Calvino's book, and I was like, okay, I guess I gotta go read that. And then the next day I get a reserve for Birds Art Life Death, and it's like, I am overwhelmed. So the plan. Finish this as soon as possible, but still make sure I'm reading it slow enough that I can enjoy it. Read this next and finish it as soon as possible, although still make sure I'm slow enough that I can enjoy it. Return them on time. If I manage to get those done in time, then I'll read Fangirl. If not, I won't worry about Fangirl because it's not really high on my TBR anymore, to be honest. I kind of don't care anymore. I have been on hold for that ebook for months. I can't even remember when I put myself on hold for it. For months, and I finally have it. And now it's been so long, I don't even really care anymore. Isn't that sad? And then after that, I have a couple other books on hold at the library, so if those come in, I guess I'll read those next, or I will go back to Dirk Gently's. But yeah, that's the plan so far. But I actually have like a concrete plan this month, which is honestly kind of weird. So that's it for this video. Comment down below, let me know how your reading month went. What did you read? What was your favorite? Also comment down below if you ever had a time where just everything you had on reserve at the library came to you at once and you were at a loss for what to read. Because that is me right now. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. And then one of the librarians was mad at me for not having read the Grishaverse trilogy and only reading Six of Crows, and so now I need to put myself on hold for those books so I can read those books. And man, so many books, so little time. So that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see y'all again in another one soon.